It's 7:04. It's called for 7. So if you'd like, we can just start now. Tim, I don't know if you have a quorum, if you want to call your
it doesn't look like we do right now. It looks like we got 3.
Okay.
So I think it's just gonna. I mean, I don't know the correct way to do it. I guess if a 4th joins, I'll have to take their the attendance.
Yep, you'll have to do roll call if they join.
Yeah.
But in the meantime,
let's just start.
If not, we can get going. Yeah, sure. Yeah. So thank you everyone for coming tonight. This has been a long time coming. We've spoken a lot about fields and courts over the course of the past year. We've worked with Activitas to outline a design, which is really our fields and courts master plan. And we kind of looked at everything comprehensively in the beginning, which we took a look at Milliken Field, we took a look at Barnes Field, Deer Hill, all the fields and courts in town. What we haven't done as of late is kind of pick off those low-hanging fruits or what we can get done that would have a greater impact in the short term. So that's what we want to talk about tonight. We want to look at a phased approach. Let's talk about phase 1 of a project, phase 2, and phase 3. Obviously, we have some items that we believe could be phase 1. I'll just highlight them now, and I'd like everyone's feedback. Phase 1 is something we're thinking about, which would be a lacrosse wall. It would be renovating the Deer Hill field and adding lights. It would be renovating the tennis courts and adding some pickleball courts up at Milliken. And part of phase 1 would just be study parking. We're not going to add parking yet. We're simply going to study it so we can get neighbor engagement. We can get neighbor engagement and figure out where to go from there. So if everyone thinks that phase 1 is really where we should go, let's start talking about it. If someone else wants to see something else, we can go there. We have Mark Novak and Olivia Messenger from Activitas with us, and they have some plans that they can show us for those phased approaches if we're all on the same page. So I will turn it over to Mark and Olivia to give their updated presentation. And then at any time, if we have any questions, just jump in. That's the reason everyone's here in this forum. It's very similar to being face-to-face. So please jump in with any questions. And I'll turn it over to you, Mark.
All right, great. Thank you, Michelle. Good evening, everyone. It's good to see some familiar faces again. It's been a little while, but Olivia, actually, would you mind sharing the presentation? To Michelle's point, how many of you, I assume all of you are familiar with the kind of needs assessment study that we performed over the past year or so. Okay, so there's really no need to go back and rehash too much of that. So why don't we flip through the first few slides, Olivia? And tonight, I think it's really just kind of looking through a finer lens at what Michelle just mentioned, that phase 1 approach. We took some really conceptual looks at what some of those low-hanging items could be. And I think it's just getting an initial reaction from everyone on the call tonight as to your opinions on that and whether or not we should continue to study those things a little bit further, start to develop a more refined conceptual plan for these items, and a more refined, obviously, opinion of probable project costs, so that when it comes to either CPC or town meeting or another funding mechanism, we have an appropriate budget for the project. So we'll skip right over items number 1 and number 2 and jump right to potential phase 1 improvements. So Deer Hill would be the first one. So this is an existing aerial image of Deer Hill. It's one multi-use rectangular field in the outfield and a softball diamond that is our understanding, was renovated a few years ago with a new backstop, correct? So, as we were diving through the needs assessment study, we identified Deer Hill as a potential renovation site. I think one of the things that we identified was due to its proximity, it was a pretty good candidate for a sports lighting system. It's kind of tucked in back, and a sports lighting system would obviously give the town more flexibility in terms of increased programmability. So let's go to the next slide, Olivia, that shows the field. So something that's a little bit different in this option, different from the original recommendation. This is a straightforward renovation. We're not relocating the roadway connecting Osgood and the Deer Hill parking lot. So it's an in-kind renovation in natural grass with sports lighting and a lacrosse wall located down along the third baseline in foul territory. We understand through conversations with Michelle that a lacrosse wall is something that is desperately wanted and needed in town and maybe we should call it a sports wall because it can be used by a number of different sports organizations and youth organizations, soccer, even field hockey. But in this scenario, we thought it might make sense. I know that it was discussed for installation potentially over at Sawyer Street. But we wanted to just kind of put it out to you all to see if maybe this project went forward, does it make sense here? Because of the ability to send student athletes over to use the wall during a practice. Since this field is large enough for boys and girls lacrosse, you could have a practice going on, and while coaches are running a practice, they could send a group of kids over to the wall for training on the wall. Additionally, if there's lights out here, we could set up a sports lighting system that's on separate circuits so that the circuits could be run for softball, they could be run for the multi-purpose field in the outfield, or we could have even a third circuit where it only turns on certain lights to illuminate the lacrosse wall for practices at odd hours. I think one of the things that, obviously you're not going to get as much utility as a synthetic turf field with a natural grass field. But when you think back to the needs assessment and the amount of usage hours that we had out here with the multiplier and the adjusted wear index that we had on this field, I think we were creeping up on 300 hours of use. So that's really kind of at the top level of use that you want to see for a field like this with your current maintenance. So one of the things that we would highly recommend if the town decided to proceed with this project is to work in a cultural maintenance program with an outside contractor. Knowing that you want to expand the use of this field, I think, adding in that outside contractor, preferably a sports turf manager, or someone who is qualified as a sports turf manager. There are a number of firms that we could refer the town to. And if they came out, anywhere between 4 to 8 times a year to perform cultural maintenance on the field, you can start to take your level of maintenance, which is now in the range of a 1 to 2, and we could bump it up to a 3, a 4, or maybe even a 5, depending on how far we want it to go. And by bumping up your level of maintenance, you can really increase the amount of use that you place on the field without converting it to synthetic turf. So I think this option definitely has a lot of merit. It's not going to provide the same, as I said, amount of impact as a synthetic turf field, but it's a great beginning. And it's a great beginning with, I would say not a significant of amount of investment, and potential kickback from the public in terms of synthetic turf. So this is just an initial thought for Deer Hill. Is there any comments or questions on what we're showing here? Again, the lacrosse wall down along the third baseline. It's double-sided, so you could use both sides. It's oriented, so if you're having a practice on the field and you're a coach out there, you could see kids working on both sides. Police, when they're patrolling the area, will be able to look across the field and see both sides of the wall. It's not blocking, one side of the wall where kids could be hanging out on the wrong side and doing things they shouldn't be doing.
Hey there. I'm sorry, can I just interrupt for 1 second?
Go ahead.
Sorry, I'm Andy Sims. I actually led the construction of that softball field install in 2021. And I was wondering, could we please, I'm a parent here in town. I used to be on the board for CYBSA. I'm no longer on the board there. Just a parent volunteer for the Little League now. I was wondering if could you please zoom way in on this? I just can't see it. Just about basically about the orientation of the lacrosse wall, the softball field. I think this sounds like it'll all work out great, but let's just see what.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So Mark, as you zoom in there, I think it's great. But a couple quick questions. We did renovate that with the conversations with town and the schools, both Osgood and Deer Hill, and we put in stone dust. The picture here, jumping to conclusions, it's just a picture. Is that clay? Are you looking to renovate that into clay?
Well, I mean, if you wanted to stay with stone dust, that's something that we could do. Obviously, clay is going to require a bit more maintenance.
Right. Right. Well, part of the main reason why stone dust was the preferred choice of the field was that kids play during the day. You can read the writing on the wall where I'm going with this. They come inside, they're tracking everything and anything. Back in 2002, 2001, I'm not sure the exact date when the school Deer Hill was renovated. The field was completely renovated with clay. And with lack of maintenance, we can show you some Google Earth photos where the grass just encroached every year. You can see it marching in.
Sure.
Having worked as being president of CYBSA right now and dealing with other fields in town, the maintenance of clay is paramount. You got to do it every year, multiple times a year, and keep it going. Stone dust is a lot easier, not only to maintain, but also to provide the schools with less custodial fees.
Sure.
And then also the encroachment of the field towards the dugouts. Right now, they're all grass. I think that would benefit the lacrosse wall to have grass continuously in front of it, as it is now.
Great.
Those are just some, based on photos and or your drawings right now.
No, these are great comments. Thank you, Vince. And yeah, stone dust.
Is the wall right behind the lacrosse goal right there? I'm just sorry. I'm on my phone. I just can barely see it.
Olivia, can you circle it with your cursor? Actually, I can. Let me see if I can. Oh, I can't annotate in the.
So Andy, I think it's a little bit.
Wait, where is this thing?
just
help me out here.
Just at the threshold of the infield to outfield, maybe a third on the infield side.
So the corner, the corner of the, let's call it the southeast corner of the lacrosse field. You have that almost like two white lines that are pointed north-south.
Yeah. Okay. Gotcha. Okay. So it's basically near third base of softball.
Correct. Yep.
Yeah. But off the field.
Correct.
Yeah. All right. Gotcha.
In line with the dugouts, or back towards right at the edge of the woods.
Yeah. Right, kick back a little bit.
Yeah. You'll have to clear. Are you guys planning on clearing some of the woods out of there?
We would have to do some tree clearing. It is pretty
Yeah.
close to a resource area. So that's something that we'd obviously have to be cognizant of and get that resource area flagged as part of the survey process. But based on our initial look using GIS and some of the town's mapping, we can do this work outside of the resource areas. And even potentially outside of the buffer.
Okay, cool. That's great. Yeah, because there's a fence. Basically, there's the foul line, the third base foul line. This looks good. The third base foul line extends out there. You've got that, and then there's a fence protecting the dugout, which basically denotes the out of play area. And it looks. I think I can see the white dash of the wall there, and that's even behind, like completely out of play. And not really in a threat of like an outfielder running to catch something and running into it. Like that all looks pretty good.
And we would have a flush transition from the natural grass to the synthetic turf surround for the lacrosse wall. And if the proximity of the northern edge of the wall was a concern, that's something that could easily be padded if we wanted to.
Cool. My question. This is Dave McDonough. Just for the group, I'm currently the president of Cohasset Lacrosse.
How are you, Dave? Good to talk to you again.
Good to see you again. So first off, it's great to see and visualize a lacrosse wall on a plan here. It's something that we've been looking for a while. I think we're one of the few towns on the South Shore that doesn't have one. And to Michelle's point up front, it is easy, relatively easy compared to some of the other capital projects we're planning here. I just did want to note for the group that we did take this to the Recreation Commission towards the end of last year, and got approval for the location of the wall at Sawyer Street. And the reason that we advocate for Sawyer Street, and in that discussion with the Rec Commission, we did talk about Deer Hill and we talked about Milliken. Our view is that this is a facility that we would want to make available for kids, obviously kids who would be practicing lacrosse, but kids could practice any other target related sports, soccer, football, baseball, against the wall itself as a sports wall. And our thought was that kids would likely use this type of facility more so on their own, rather than during a practice. Our practice times are somewhat limited, and I also coach a couple of the teams, but we don't really send kids to do bounce backs during practice just because we have limited time during the week to practice with the kids. We tell them to practice on their own at home, which is what they do. So the reasons that we like the Sawyer Street location, there was 3 reasons. One was that it's central within the town, which Deer Hill still is somewhat central. The second was that area at Sawyer Street's already lit. So it's good to hear that this could potentially be lit. But the third was visibility. If you go down past Sawyer Street, there's kids playing hoops all the time, and you can drive by and see what kids are there. My concern with this would be, like, as we talked about as a board, we said, how do we feel about Milliken or Deer Hill? If I was telling one of my kids, why don't you go down the wall and practice? I wouldn't be as willing to send a kid by themselves to the back of Deer Hill on their own in the evening to practice as I would to Sawyer Street. So I just had that comment, that just to provide that perspective on why we advocated for the Sawyer Street solution and why that was ultimately approved by the Rec Commission. And then just the two other points. One, just on how. So
Dave, can I ask a question on that?
Sure.
Or a couple of questions?
Sure.
Those are all great points. And I'm just curious, with the Sawyer Street location, is it a done deal because it was approved by Recreation?
It was approved by the Rec. I know there's Rec Commission members on here, and Michelle's on here. It was approved by the Rec Commission, contingent upon Activitas doing a survey of the land at Sawyer Street to confirm where on that field would be the best spot, and then getting funding. And it actually went to the town meeting, but then it was pulled off the warrant last minute by the CPC.
I gotcha. Okay. And then second question, when you were kind of conceptualizing it over at Sawyer Street, was it a single-sided wall or was it set up so you could use both sides?
It set up for both sides.
Okay.
Yeah, Dave, and I think part of the issue too, we did a really rough, spray paint, outline down there, and I think part of the issue was the sort of the way the land kind of lies, and where we were going to try to like kind of shoehorn it in. And the more important thing, rather than that, because you can make, you can do anything with grading and what have you, but more to the point, it was more the light from the basketball courts didn't really get to the area that we had kind of roughed out. So it was less, it was going to be less optimal from a nighttime standpoint. Okay. Because I know that was one of the things you guys were excited about, was being able to, while those lights were on, to be able to have kids go down there. Yeah,
it was more that the area was lit, but yeah. Well, thanks for that. I didn't realize that had been evaluated by the rec commission.
I mean, just spitballing here, from a Cohasset Youth Lacrosse perspective, Dave, if it were to go at Deer Hill, if it went on the northern side of that access drive, kind of where that grass clearing is? If you take right field, you extend it all the way, right where Olivia's tiny cursor is.
Potentially, yeah. I was going to say that the location there might be tough because any missed balls would end up in the woods on either side.
And I think.
So can I weigh in here? I live right next door at 166 Sawyer, and that's all wet back there. So I'm not sure that would work, but I do have a question about the lights. Like, do we know what the hours of the lights are?
At Sawyer Street?
Yeah.
They go off at 10 o'clock.
Okay.
You may not have noticed them in the last little bit because every time we have a power outage, the DPW needs to reset them. So they haven't been reset since the cold last Friday night.
Okay.
So Mary, those lights are down by the library, down by the basketball courts.
Yes.
Are you inquiring about potential lights on the
Deer Hill? No, I'm asking about the potential lights at the Deer Hill fields.
Right. Oh, okay. Right. Yeah. That's not what I was referring to, Mary. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. There are existing lights down by the basketball courts right now that are on for the courts behind the library.
Okay.
But I know where you live, so I'm assuming.
So I'm on Sawyer Street, like where you just pointed out where there's you were talking about maybe putting the wall just beyond that in the woods there, and it's all wet over there. So, but I'm also the public health nurse for the town, and I just would like to weigh in. And I'm not Debbie Downer, but I just want to say that as the global we get warmer, the climate gets warmer, we're more at risk for like mosquito-borne illnesses. So I want you to think about that. And the most vulnerable are young kids and grandparents. And who goes to the kids' games? Grandparents, young kids, siblings, are there. So just think about that. I just want you to put that in the back of your mind. In terms of being out after dusk. I mean, we always talk about dusk to dawn, right? Put your bug spray on. And so something to think about.
So Mark, I had one other question about the field itself. Mm-hmm. And this is something so typically for lacrosse, our girls teams played at Deer Hill, and because you line a girls field differently than you line a boys field. So we would line Deer Hill as a girls field. And they got feedback from their league last year that the size of the field at Deer Hill was not regulation. So they're actually going to be playing games on the high school turf and on Milliken this year.
Okay.
Instead of at Deer Hill. So I just wanted to raise that point since you have the outline of a girls lacrosse field in yellow on here. I think the white is field hockey.
It is.
I know very, very little about girls lacrosse, but I was told by some of our coaches that they got that feedback from the league they play in, and that's why they're not going to play there.
Yeah, I mean, Olivia, can you go back one slide and just flash back and forth? Like, I don't know that.
Dave, it's Julie Rollins. I'm so glad you brought that up. I was just going to ask if the renovation of this particular field included it being made.
It's a slight expansion.
Yes. Yeah, because I know that the current one is not regulation.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. I assumed that it was using the existing space, so I just want to make sure that was clear. Thank you.
Yeah.
So the renovation includes making it larger.
Yes, slightly, in order to achieve that regulation size field. Yes.
And is that renovation on what, as we're looking at on this page, on the northeast side of the field, or top right?
No, it would be page down, I believe, right, Olivia?
Yeah, we're extending into the woods a little bit just to make it longer.
Okay.
Can I make a comment? Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. I'm Katie Holden. I live on Norfolk Road. I'm a parent, a daughter that goes to Deer Hill. There is an existing trail behind the baseball court. There is an existing trail. And so I'm just curious, I don't really understand the limit of work. Like, I'm hearing it's expanding into the woods. Mm-hmm. And I just kind of, like, a lot of people go, there's a pathway, which I'm sure you all know about, like between the schools, and there's like, they're gonna, when they expand the field and for the lacrosse, if this happens, then where's the limit of work? Where there'll still be that access to that trail that goes back to an outdoor education area, and will there be still that, access way for kids to traverse, or is it all going to be blocked off?
No, that's a great question. I think the intent would obviously be to keep the access, and if we can't keep it in its current state, it would be to recreate it in order to facilitate the slight expansion of the field. Without having a full survey and kind of drilling down on the design details and the grading associated with the proposed expansion, we can't precisely speak to what the limit of work would be. So this is all still very conceptual in nature, and I think it was the intent of this is really to see if we're on the right track for a potential renovation project, or do we need to think of something else. But your point of maintaining the walkway and access to the outdoor educational area and access between the two schools, like those items are very important for us to hear as designers, so that should this project start to move forward to another level of design, that's something that we can put into the scope of work and make sure that we tackle.
Okay. And I have one more. It may not be helpful at all, but we've done a bunch of, for my scout groups, different Girl Scouts and BSA scout groups, we've done a lot of cleanup there. And it's the cleanup goes way back in the woods, like 20 feet. It's like, there's so much trash, and maybe the lacrosse ball would catch some of that. but like it's really, once you get going, you're like, wow, there's a lot. And I think it gets blown in there. We found about 25 lacrosse balls.
Oh, wow.
So I don't know from a design point what you can do, if there's anything, but it's just something to consider.
I think from a field use, and whether or not the lacrosse ball goes here, or it goes north of the access road, or it goes over at Sawyer Street or someplace else, ball control is always something that we take into consideration. I have young kids that play lacrosse. I don't want to see them, at practice after shooting on goal, have to wander off into the woods and tromping through poison ivy and all that, trying to pick up loose balls. So, we look at netting systems and fencing systems to control overthrown balls. I like, short fencing systems with netting systems on top, all in black materials because they tend to fade into the landscape better, and they're not, you don't know that there's a wall there, but there is. So that's something that we would consider as part of the design as well. Thank you for your comments.
Yeah, Katie, just knowing where the path is between in between Osgood and Deer Hill that goes over to, what's it, Old Coach or Evergreen, I think it is. That would not impact this, and that platform that's out there for outdoor education as well inside. There would be no impact. That's actually another Eagle Scout project, the benches out there. So.
Oh, good. It's hard to tell from the picture. I don't want to discouraging use.
Dave, while I got you, and we're kind of on the subject of this area and potential lacrosse wall here or Sawyer, what kind of dimensions would you be looking for in terms of the area around the wall?
I'm not sure. We hadn't done a measurement itself.
Okay. Okay.
But
and I only ask because I think that's really end user specific.
Yeah.
You know what they're looking for.
In our presentation to the Rec Commission, we included the pictures of the walls in Hingham, Duxbury, Scituate, Marshfield, and I think everyone thought the Scituate one was kind of the ideal size.
Okay.
I think you guys might have actually been involved in that project too, right?
Yeah, I did that one. Yeah.
So yeah, just one of those.
Did you like that wall? I mean, because I think that wall is a relatively economical solution. It's a precast wall that Scituate Concrete Companies provides. Out of Marshfield. So you know, we've done other walls like over at Weston High School where they're all cast in place, and you know, it's really like bridge abutment formwork, and they can get quite expensive with the amount of rebar and stuff.
No, the one in Scituate is great. I think that's kind of what we were holding as the standard from a size perspective too. Like the one in Duxbury is a similar construction, but it's wider. I think the Hingham one might be a little taller, but Scituate one was the benchmark.
Okay, great.
Dave and Mark, it's Julie Rollins. When Ted, who meets with us on the Rec Commission, marked out the potential lacrosse wall at the Sawyer Street location, he used 45 by 55. I'm not sure. Can't remember why he used those dimensions.
Julie, he asked us if we wanted to go check it out, and he said he sent like the rec department as interns, or
he said
kids were working, sent them down to Scituate to measure their space.
Yes. Okay, so 45 by 55 is what they painted out on the field, if that's helpful.
Awesome, thank you, Julie.
Yeah.
And Dave, I'm a former lacrosse player myself, but you mentioned earlier at Sawyer you were looking at a double-sided, and now we're talking about a single-sided here at Deer Hill. Is your preference?
No, Deer Hill's double-sided.
Deer Hill's double-sided?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, just the way it looks on the picture here, it's kind of deep, then it kind of pushes into the woods. So
it does. A comment I made, as is, I think the balls would potentially end up in the woods, and we would be picking up even more.
Right,
we would have to have definitely some ball control around that, and also, you know, I think the image is a little deceiving. In order to get that wall in where we're showing it, there'd have to be some more clearing on either, let's call it the page left and page right of the wall. The synthetic turf area, in order to get that area graded out appropriately. And then that would probably be loamed and seeded. I know at Scituate, at least when, you know, my older son, who's last year was 7th grade going into 8th grade now, when they use the wall, sometimes they're off of the synthetic turf kind of using it more long toss.
Yep.
As opposed to just straight bounce back. But if we're grading out that area and they're throwing from behind the team area on the third baseline, that's still a possibility. All that area back there is outside of the resource area. So, but having said that, I also understand the concerns about it being so removed from everything else.
Right.
So,
well, I heard two words. Bounce back into wetlands, but then also, would that area be synthetic? I heard
the area around the wall would be synthetic, yeah, because that
Okay.
takes the most abuse. Yeah.
All right. Yep. Yeah, there would be a lot of traffic there. Okay.
Yeah.
So how much clearing are we estimating? Like how much tree removal, how much impact are we talking?
So again, Katie, I can't give you specific amounts right now because this design is so conceptual in nature.
It is outside the buffer zone, or we don't even know how close.
So it hasn't been flagged. We're working off of GIS. So in order to, if this site, if the town deems that this site is an appropriate candidate for exploring further, the first thing we would do is have the resource areas flagged and the site surveyed, and then we would know exactly where the edge of the resource area and the buffers are. But based on GIS, all of our clearing and our work that we're showing on this conceptual rendering is outside of the buffer.
Okay.
Katie, I can walk the area with you.
Yeah.
I know pretty well.
It's always been considering locations to not assume that you can just not, if there's something you don't have to impact trees, then
Yeah, I'm a landscape architect, so I'm not going out there to. Obviously, I want to support youth sports or programs, but where we can, we like to save trees.
Okay.
All right. So in the interest of time, if we could just move on to the next slide. Unless there's any more questions on the Deer Hill. Okay. So this is Milliken. Everyone's very familiar with Milliken. Hearing Jeremy talk earlier, we're aware that the building is being renovated with restrooms now, which is great news. I think what Michelle had touched on earlier was phase one could be a project that really addresses some of the court needs and concerns in town. So the existing courts at Milliken are in pretty rough shape. And Michelle and I have been looking at them now for, gosh, maybe 6-7 years since we first started talking about those, Michelle. So what we're looking at here is a potential phase one renovation for Milliken, and that's redoing the courts and redoing them with, go ahead, Olivia, 5 tennis courts and 5 pickleball courts. So the overall footprint of the court battery expands slightly to the west or towards the high school. The retaining wall in between the natural grass athletic fields of Milliken and the tennis courts needs to be replaced. It's seen the end of its useful life. It's leaning, it's cracking. There's some structural issues with it. It also has those buttresses or a giant buttress that kind of cuts down between 2 of the courts. So that could be removed. And a new retaining wall to support the natural grass athletic fields above would be installed. 5 tennis courts with lighting, 5 pickleball courts with lighting, and a reconstructed wall. That would, and also Olivia showed the update on the building along Bancroft. But that's the general idea for the first phase. Can you zoom in on the courts, Olivia, just so everyone can get a closer look? This is quite far out. So again, very conceptual in nature. You know, we do have survey for this area from a number of years ago. There are no resource areas below the courts. We are aware that they're relatively close to some abutters, I believe on the northern side of the property. And the grade goes down relatively steeply to the abutting properties. So the reconstruction of these courts would take into account proper retention, both not only on the field side, but on the abutting property side. We could look at the construction of these courts in a number of different ways. One of them would be, you know, your traditional asphalt or bituminous concrete base with an acrylic colored surfacing. But what a lot of municipalities and colleges, universities, private schools are moving forward with these days is post-tension concrete courts. So post-tension concrete is a concrete that gets stressed or pre-stressed, and they float as a singular panel, as opposed to concrete, bituminous concrete or asphalt. You know, you can expect those courts to last 12 to 15 years, sometimes even less, because asphalt just isn't the same material that it used to be. There's a lot of additives in it these days that make it not as strong as it used to be. Even by calling for virgin asphalt materials, you still run the risk of having premature cracking on your courts. We do our best to control that cracking with putting in control saw cut joints in strategic locations in the courts. But it is a risk, and you definitely don't get the same life cycle out of asphalt as you do post-tension concrete. With post-tension concrete, it's a more costly construction process, but you could expect 50 plus years out of a post-tension concrete court in terms of the base. You'll need to redo the coloring after a number of years, but the actual structure or the base of the courts will last a long, long time, and the cost-benefit analysis definitely leans in that direction, to the point where one of our largest tennis court installation companies that we do work with here in Massachusetts, Cape and Island Track and Tennis out of Pocasset, Massachusetts, they pretty much will not do an asphalt court anymore. They only do clay courts and post-tension concrete.
Just they're the ones that just redid the track at Alumni.
Yes. Yep.
So, Mark, I have a couple questions. Actually, first, I want to address one of the attendees, Derek Goodwin, has his hand raised.
Sure.
So, Derek?
Hey, can you hear me now?
We can.
Hi, Derek.
Oh, great. Hey, how you doing? Thanks for taking the time. I'm actually on Norfolk Road as well, and I'm just looking at this plan. I had a couple questions. One being, I mean, you mentioned the retaining wall, but also, how are you addressing stormwater runoff? Because again, the tennis courts do sit higher than a lot of the abutting properties.
Yeah, that's.
Or how would you?
That's a good question, and that's something that we haven't dived in, really taken a deeper look at yet. One of the things that we could do is, you know, we're going to have to manipulate the grade out there. Currently, they all slope towards the abutting properties, and I have to imagine that in a significant rainfall event, you get a gully washer coming down that slope. We could pitch the courts back towards the retaining wall and have a trench drain or a channel drain at the base of the retaining wall. that then takes it to either out to infiltration chambers or to some kind of a detention system located outside the limits of the athletic fields. That's one option. Another option would be to take it and put it in the stormwater system associated with Bancroft.
Great. And then actually one other question, just follow-up question. I'm sure most people that have visited tennis courts are aware of the path behind the tennis courts that actually runs up to Pleasant Street, used by a lot of the neighborhood actually to get to and from the schools. It looks like with the expansion out into the woods there, that's actually where the access to that path is. I don't know if that is being taken into consideration with this plan as well.
I think much like what we just talked about over at Deer Hill, Derek, if there is currently utilized trails or path networks that would get disturbed by the proposed construction, we would adjust them to allow for continued use as part of the design. And one of the things, you know, this is what we're calling phase one for Milliken. And as part of the needs assessment, we presented a relatively grand vision for Milliken. Through several design iterations, there's a whole walking trail and path network with fitness stations that we were proposing on the western side of the athletic field, so through the woods and page left of the existing baseball field and soccer fields. So that would be a future phase that would be looked at as well.
Got it. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay. So next we have Sarah McSweeney. She has her hand raised. Then Jeremy DeBona has a question.
Thanks, Michelle. First of all, thank you to Michelle, Mark, and Olivia. Great work. Obviously, a lot of time and energy has gone into this, so much appreciated. For those who don't know me, Sarah McSweeney, Cohasset resident, alumni of Cohasset High School, and those tennis courts look just like they did. And I'm not going to divulge my age, but you know, I think you guys can back into the math. So I have high schoolers and middle schoolers. A couple of questions I have in the initial, before you had zoomed out on this slide, in phase one, there was reference to the tennis courts and pickleball courts, which is fantastic. There was also a reference to the baseball fields. I'm hoping you can spend a minute just so we can kind of look at this in totality when we say, does this make sense for phase one to kind of make sure we're not just looking at it piecemeal for pickleball and tennis. So I'd love you to spend a bit of time on that. The second point is, we also have, Michelle, an open item on the kind of bottom of the screen. There's that screen, excuse me, there's a set of stairs that go down to that street. And also used for the high schoolers and middle schoolers, they move up those stairs to get onto the fields. I know that was an open item last year. I thought, Michelle, I'm not trying to spend your money, but I think we secured funding for that to have those redone so that they're safe and not the way they are now. So just want to make sure we have that as an open action item from.
Yep. So Sarah, not only is that open, Vince, who's on the call, can actually speak to it after Jeremy asks his questions. They're going to be completed hopefully this spring.
Excellent. I know there was some staffing issues last year, so that's fabulous. So I guess I'll give Mark and Olivia a minute just to shed some details on kind of what your vision is around the baseball facilities for the high school varsity athletes.
Olivia, you want to go to I think the next slide we had kind of a phase two build out. So really it's working within the same footprint, Sarah. You know, and I don't want people to get too worked up about the parking that we're showing over by the tennis and pickleball courts. You know, that was probably one of the largest comments or most common comments that we received during the needs assessment was that all of the facilities in town have parking challenges. And I am acutely aware of the parking challenges at Milliken with my children also playing soccer and having come over there to play some games. So, we're continually looking at parking options. Originally, we had courts expanding further to the west. We think that that area where the drive comes in off a reservoir and the courts end, there's the potential to do some parking in that general region as well. And that would pull it further away from the abutting properties. We originally looked at parking coming in off of the private way page down from the baseball field. But we scrapped that because it's a private way. But generally, the footprint for the fields and the baseball field would remain generally the same. I think the largest thing that Milliken would need in terms of the phase 2 renovation is, some additional assets in terms of batting cages and team areas over at the baseball field. But really it's improving the profile and system out on Milliken. Talking with Jeremy back during the needs assessment, he's constantly chasing his tail out there with settlement and holes in the surface because of what people generally believe when this field was created. It was built over a stump dump or something, and when those stumps rot and dissipate underground, they leave a void that then the top profile caves in on. So I think that's the larger concern with Milliken. The stand of grass, at least over the past couple of years when I've been there, hasn't been too bad. Obviously, the high use areas get worn and beat pretty good. But I think it's an overall reconstruction of the entire natural grass profile that we were thinking about for phase 2.
Okay, so just for clarity, just to kind of dumb it down for me, in phase 1, the high school varsity baseball field at Milliken stays in care and maintenance mode. Is that an accurate statement?
Correct.
Okay. I'm saying, okay, I hear you. Okay, Michelle, I can't see you because I'm only looking at Mark, who's done a fantastic job this evening, but obviously we have to have some dialogue because there's just work that needs to be done to get that to be appropriately ready for the same conversation we had last year to make sure that that's ready for our visiting teams to come in and the varsity athletes to play there and making sure it's up to MIAA and all that good stuff. So we can take that offline. I just want to make sure.
We can, and there is a plan, Sarah.
I know Michelle, I'm not worried. I sleep better at night knowing you're on
it. And that's something, Michelle, and is it Karen or Sarah?
Sarah,
sorry. Okay. That's something that, I'm happy to have that conversation with you guys. And if there's something that we can be of any assistance in planning for, I'm happy to help in any way we can.
Okay. Yeah, there might be some short-term milestones, Michelle, that we can potentially look at as kind of in phase 1, because phase 2 sounds like, I'm not trying to block you into dates, but phase 2 sounds like I don't even know if you guys have set out milestones or timelines around phase 1, ECD expected completion date versus phase 2, if you've scoped that out yet.
No,
okay.
We haven't, but we should talk about milestones for this particular baseball diamond, and I think you'll be pleased with what we have.
Excellent. Okay. Thank you.
Sure. Can I just comment on all the turf in general, since we're talking maintenance a little?
Sure, Darren.
We're over at the Little League complex at Barnes, and there's a lot of wear and tear over there. And so,
not just,
we don't have and again, it could be here in this discussion, but the investment in some of the equipment that I think would also benefit lacrosse, soccer, field hockey, et cetera, aerators, spreaders, a budget for top dressing, for loam, for mulch. So we did seed for fertilizer. So we kind of went through over the Columbus Day weekend and we just did a rental with Taylor, and we kind of put the sweat equity in. And so I think with respect to any of these surfaces, you know, we do suffer from maybe, I know there's a Harley rake kind of floating around somewhere, but I'd love to see some of that equipment that benefits not just the softball, baseball, but all across the board. So, you know, if we can just carve out the money, there's probably storage considerations. DPW, I know, is very stretched thin, and I know they can't get enough help. But if, you know, we can sort of go into shutdown mode a week or so for each of these surfaces, aerate, seed them, fertilize them, top dress them, keep them going. But this varsity baseball diamond, I think the upkeep that we've been fighting for, and that Sarah, you've been at the forefront, you, Michelle, and you others, you lose the gains pretty quickly if you don't have the tools.
Yeah. One more comment, and then I'm literally going to go back on mute because I've been talking all day, and I'm out of my swim lane and talking about Harley rakes. I'm in finance, but we did look at that last year, Darren, when Michelle was so helpful in getting a refurb, for lack of a better words, for Milliken, because we talked about when all that money went in, we were really passionate about ongoing maintenance, right? So that we're not throwing you know, more dollars away. So, and the DPW guys have the big one. Again, I'm not a rake person, but we did talk about the smaller one, which could be used at you know, the Barnes Complex, Beechwood, where the JV you know, folks play, and also we get money for out of town AAUs at that Beechwood. So we did have that, and we scoped out an economic model on that smaller one, and the DPW guys could drag that on the back, as well as these lovely town volunteers as well. So
and we did place an order for that. So Sarah, that order has been placed. So
everything leads to Michelle. Awesome.
It should be here within the next few weeks.
Yeah,
that's great.
Sarah, that was approved at the December town meeting, and I've been working with Michelle on that front. So
that's great. That's great.
Don't worry.
We're not gonna. My goal is not to hijack to talk about baseball, although we certainly could. So Michelle, we can just do a kind of a breakout with, you know, myself and Vince and Darren, and maybe just talk a little bit about upcoming, because the season is coming. You know, even though it feels cold outside, so we can just make sure we're all teed up for that. And I've also had a conversation with Steve Rotundi, who's absolutely happy to participate if there's any funding that's needed.
Sure.
Excellent.
Sounds good. Okay.
Just to put a bow on all of that, I think we're acutely aware as well that, you know, all of these natural grass renovation discussions, they're going to have to come with a very comprehensive deferred maintenance plan that gets tied to the project, because, you know, originally with the needs assessment, we were talking workhorse with synthetic turf fields. If they're not going to be synthetic turf fields, the only way to expand your programmability on these fields is by upping your maintenance, and upping your maintenance game costs money, right? So that's something that will be discussed and tied into at least our recommendations for these projects.
Great, thank you. And so Jeremy has a question.
Yes, on the tennis courts, I know the tennis courts now, they have lights. Are lights going to be still put in these tennis courts?
We are calling for lights, Jeremy, yeah.
Okay. And then the other question is, so if we build this, and now we got more tennis courts, the parking on Saturdays up there with soccer, that, you know, how, you know, because we're already tight as is.
Yeah.
And they get there, you know, people playing for a couple hours. You know.
Yeah, I think, you know, if this is something that we are directed to move forward and study further, I think it can't be just, all right, let's do the tennis courts and then we'll study the parking in the future. Right. It needs to go hand in hand. It needs to go hand in hand. And maybe the parking doesn't go as part of this phase. You know, maybe that's a next year phase or 2 years phase. I don't know the economics of that, but it's something that definitely needs to be studied further and understood along with the renovation.
Yeah. And into the field maintenance, with the new bathroom shed being renovated, they are bringing over the sprinkler system into the shed. Right now, it's not even working. So the sprinklers don't even work at the field. They're going to take it out of the well a coffin that they have all the controls and they're supposed to bring it.
A coffin.
Well, that's what it is. You have to go down.
Yeah, yeah, it's a pit. Yeah.
And everything breaks, and they just haven't replaced it. So that's going to go into the new shed.
That's great.
Updated shed, so they'll have better access to the controls for the irrigation. Because I think it's been a couple of years since the irrigation hasn't worked up there.
I thought I was over there this fall, and I thought the stand of grass was looking pretty good over there.
That's all from rain. That's
yeah.
The only time
we were in drought last year, but that's a different story.
You know when the irrigation isn't working, when the old field track or the old track starts to produce itself.
You can see it in the aerial, I think, in the previous image.
Yes, you can.
Yeah.
That's when you know the irrigation is not working and the pump is out.
So we have another question from Katie Holden, and then I think we should move along and just discuss, if phase one is what everyone thinks is a great idea, how to move it forward, when to have a public forum, and keeping the conversations going. But go ahead, Katie.
Katie, you're on mute.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Sorry. Okay, sorry, I'll make this quick. I'm also, as I mentioned, Derek mentioned this, but I really want to reiterate because I see it all the kids that's their route to school. And so they take their bikes and they're walking. And so they're it's just important to really think about are bikes going to be allowed? Right now it's hard to get your bike up the stairs and go across the field, or they go across the courts, but it hasn't been a problem. But now that you have a new nice courts, is that going to be a problem? Or is there a way to go behind the new pickleball courts and create that a safe route without them? I don't know. It's just, it's a major thoroughway through the whole neighborhood going to and fro. So I don't want it to be oh, it's just a couple kids. It's it's the way.
Yeah. Okay.
School with bikes and everything. So anyways, that's it. Derek already mentioned it, but I just really wanted to reiterate that, and that's it. Okay.
Awesome. Thank you.
And Mark, I actually just have one question. When we're talking about pickleball courts and tennis courts, are we talking about ADA compliance to access these pickleball and tennis courts? Because that's been a question that's been asked several times, and I just wanted to bring it to the forefront.
Yes.
Okay.
Anything we do will have universal access. I can't put something on paper and stamp it if it doesn't.
Excellent. Okay.
I think, Olivia, that was kind of our show and tell for the evening, correct?
Correct.
Okay, great. So if you don't mind, I like just to say a couple of things. One being, so this is our phase one approach, and what we think could be a great phase one approach for the community. And as stakeholders, we just want your buy-in. Is everyone amenable to this being phase one? Is there anything here that's missing that you think is most important for phase one that's been left out? And also, we have to tie some funding around this, right? So how much is all this going to cost? And the answer is, we don't really know yet. We know it's not going to cost as much as the large project that we had in the master plan, which amounted to almost $20 million in fields and courts. But I guess just a show of hands, is everyone okay with phase one? And then part two to this would be, as far as funding mechanisms, is everyone willing to, kind of get behind this project and see it to the end to make sure that there's funding appropriated for it? So I know that's two different questions, but first question, is everyone on board for phase one?
So Michelle, if I may jump in.
You may.
I am completely behind phase one, both with Deer Hill and Milliken. Two items that I want to kind of focus on. not necessarily funding, because that's so much later, but I know Mary Goodwin lives close behind the Deer Hill School. We didn't talk about where the light posts would be or where the light pollution may transcribe. I know Darren and I have worked long and hard on light pollution and where that may fall, but I want to make sure that our neighbors are happy, or try to be as happy as possible.
I'll just quickly talk about potential light pollution. So with the technology of sports lighting systems today, we can guarantee that there will be no spill beyond the property line of the site. They're LED sports lighting systems, so it's a complete umbrella of light going down on the field. So there will be no spill. It's designed in the computers, and then it's verified with light meters afterwards. So, you know, I think that's a larger discussion.
No, Mark, I just wanted to bring that up because being involved with the CYBSA program for lights and on the field over there. Sorry. I'm fully aware of the new LED technology and the location, but I just wanted to bring that up for the public. I don't want, you know, full transparency on this front.
And it's always a sensitive subject with these types of facilities.
Absolutely. Thank you.
If I may, I think you're going to run into a very, very similar concern with Milliken. I mean, you got a dozen abutters there, and you're talking about putting lights and basically creating a UFO in what now is a forest essentially around it. So definitely got to tread lightly there.
Thank you, Derek. Although there are lights there now, they're just inoperable.
This is Dave. I just wanted on the wall itself, wanted to see if we were to move forward with Sawyer instead of Deer Hill, could that still be part of this phase one? And then secondarily, is it possible to assess the site for it, as that was the action item coming out of the Rec Commission approval?
Sure.
Michelle's my boss, so if she says yes, I say yes.
No, so Dave, the lacrosse wall obviously is part of phase one. Whether it end up at Sawyer Street or Deer Hill, it's part of phase one. And Activitas can look at that space. I think we need to involve the Rec Commission a little more and get their feedback.
So that I think and again, there's Rec Commission committee members here. But the approval from the Rec Commission was for the Sawyer Street site contingent upon assessment by Activitas and funding. Yep. Those are the two.
Yep. So Activitas can certainly look at it based on the measurements that we have here from Situate, which is 45 by 55, and based on the drawing that was done by Ted. We still have that. So the answer is yes.
Okay. And just on the site itself, one of the concerns that Ted had raised that should be taken into account is that there's, I guess, power lines that go underground there to the light post from the street. And just one question, like to get to your second question, Michelle, on like if this group is supportive of this phase one, could you or somebody from the town just talk about the process? I've just have a little PTSD from this before, like getting onto the town meeting and then being taken off at the last minute. What is the right process for funding the project, and who are the different groups and stakeholders in the town that we would need to meet with?
Sure.
Nobody.
So I can answer all those questions. So this is a preliminary process, right? We're trying to get buy-in as to moving a phase forward. So phase one would move forward. We get the buy-in from this group. Everyone's in favor of this project. We get preliminary costs from Activitas. as soon as we get those preliminary costs, we now need to go to capital. We need to go to the advisory committee. We need to go to the select board. And if some of these projects are to be funded by CPC, we also have to go to CPC. Yeah. So we have to go to all of those committees to get all of the buy-in. And then there has to be funding available, right? So even if all of those committees say, yep, we're supportive, but we don't have all the funding to give, then unfortunately the project doesn't move. So you have to go before all those committees and propose your projects. And this would be one project. It wouldn't just be the lacrosse wall, tennis courts, or Deer Hill. I think we'd go in as a package to see what the appetite is to get them all done. And then it comes down to funding and whether or not the community feels as though this is important and wants to move it forward.
Hey, Michelle. Oh,
hi.
Just to weigh in on that too.
Go ahead.
And Mark, and Olivia, if you don't mind stopping screen sharing, I think it might be helpful to, there we go. Just to add some color on that, I'm also on the long-term financial planning committee for Cohasset. So we're watching and looking at all the money. And at the end of the day, as I'm just going to put it out there, that this may be something where we just simply don't have enough money for in the existing revenue sources. And we will have to do what's called the debt exclusion, i.e. ask the voters to do a one-time tax increase to fund a part of it, if not whatever amount we need for this package. What that requires, just so people are aware of the timing, is the select board has to make a decision by April in order to put it on the ballot. And then people have to vote on it both at town meeting and then at the ballot in order to have this work funded. We're still trying to figure out all the different needs. I can tell you right now, and Michelle, correct me on the exact number, but just for your awareness, right now we've got about $7 million in capital requests for this year. And the money in our capital fund is about $1.9 million, 600 of which are debt payments for money that was already spent for prior year's capital equipment. So again, we're trying to figure this out. And this is a big part of why we're trying to make sure that people are really on board with this, because this isn't just going to be town meeting. This could be a vote at the ballot as well. If we can't raise funds in other sources, including sources like CPC or other mechanisms that are out there. And we're trying to also do a phase one that we think is achievable, that has wide-ranging appeal, because if it's at the ballot, we're going to need all of your help because it's going to require a ballot vote in addition to a town meeting vote. So I wanted to be transparent too about where I think we might be heading in light of how the money is working.
Okay, so does anyone have any questions about that? Is everyone still on board to move this forward? Because what we don't want is Activitas to move forward and getting us cost estimates on a phase that not everyone wants to see move forward. So if in fact this group says, yep, let's go, Activitas will work their best to get us those numbers so then we can start socializing it. I see Darren's raising his hands. I think Deirdre took her.
Oh, I was just going to ask, sorry, Dee Riley, I'm on Open Space Committee. I was just wondering, do we have a ballpark idea of what kind of number this might come in at? Just low, high, just a range, just so we can kind of get our head around it, or is that ridiculous to ask?
It's not ridiculous to ask. I don't think we're comfortable sharing a number tonight, because whatever number we say tonight, everyone is going to hold us to that number. I am confident that before the end of next week, I will be able to socialize a number with you, a low range and a high range. And then we can work from there. And I may have that number sooner just by plucking out of the prior plan, but we want to make sure that we don't share a number that
understood completely.
Yeah. And I think, Michelle, to that point, we'll probably want to revisit that. There's been so much volatility in the market over the past year. numbers are changing almost on a daily basis. So we'll take another look at that the end of this week, early next week, and report back to you on where we see things coming in.
Great, thank you. And then we have Derek has his hand raised, and then Sarah.
Yeah, so thanks again, Mark and Michelle. Are we looking for approval to move forward with phase one to get funding to execute the project, or to get funding to execute a deeper dive study? Because, you know, as we kind of talked about a couple of times tonight, you know, I brought up the question about stormwater, and we obviously talked a little bit about you know, doing a deeper dive analysis on the parking, as well as, I mean, if we're going to add lighting to the tennis courts, there's some research that needs to be done there, and the path was brought up again. So obviously there's a lot that's unaccounted for in the current proposal. And I'm just wondering, you know, if we say, yeah, let's move forward with phase one, are we going out saying we're going to move forward with phase one and execute these projects? That's what we're looking for money for, or we need to do a little more planning?
So I think that's a really good question. And I think the easy answer here is, if we're going to move forward with these projects, there has to be more planning involved, right? We can't just move forward. These are conceptual. We're going to have to move forward with more planning. And if this group does agree with this phase and we want to move forward, it is additional study that's going to have to go into these specific projects. But we don't want them to stall. We want to say, this is a great phase one, let's move it forward. And by moving it forward means that Activitas now is going to look into all of those things that you mentioned that you're concerned about, and all of the things that the neighbors are concerned about lighting, about your stormwater, about your trails, and they'll have to account for all of that. Because ultimately, it's not really a project till it goes out to bid.
And Michelle,
yes.
There would be a lot more engagement,
yes.
So that, you know, as the designs progress, you know, we need to come back in front of the town to make sure that we're moving them in the right way, and various boards and, you know, all the youth organizations, et cetera. So it's a process. It's a process. And I think you're saying we just want to start the process, right?
Exactly. We just want to start somewhere. So we have Sarah and Darren.
Just a quick comment to Michelle's point, or sorry, to Jean's point, apologies, around if it's going to require funding and it needs to go to whether it's town meeting and or a vote. I just think, particularly in the economic climate we're in, we should make sure that we think about it, kind of chunk it up a little bit, which is, this is phase one. I'm making up the numbers, by the way. I'm not Mark and Olivia. I'm not locking you in. It's 10 million. I'm making a number, you know, back $10 million for phase one, and then phase two is $7 million. So people kind of see it in totality, because if you go to phase one and say, I need 10, then you're back later for 7, people are going to get frustrated. It's just, we're going to lead ourselves to disaster, not success. So I think we got to think about the entire proposition in totality, and then kind of say to people, you know, we're thinking about chunking it up so people can understand why they're, you know, voting for $10 million as phase one and down the road. I think we just have to be careful there, because if people see phase one and they see some pickleball courts and a thing behind Deer Hill, they're going to kind of say, ah. But if you say, hey, we're chunking it up, so we're being fiscally responsible, we're going to spread it over a multi-year, this is transformational work. If we build new schools, this won't be throwaway. Like, you have to get a little bit more of a narrative around it, so people just don't say, I'm 65 years old and I don't want to buy, I don't even know what a lacrosse ball is, and I'm not getting behind it. And you kind of want to, we got to think about how we chunk it up and then kind of just solution it all the way through.
Great point, Sarah. Thank you.
Michelle,
Darren?
Can I ask one more question?
So Dave, can you hang on 1 second so Darren can
sure.
Get his question?
I'll put my hand up.
Dave, I'll be quick. Just so I think obviously thank you Activitas for doing this comprehensive study. I think if we fast forward to, you know, what right looks like, we know we're deficient with our facilities across all sports and the maintenance thereof, the space, the maintenance, and the capacity. Do people move to Cohasset because we have as much field space as Weymouth? They do not. We all get that, but you know, we're definitely the pains grow by the year. So I think realistically, we all prioritize the schools, and there's other things in town. So I think this first phase looks great. Sarah, to your point, you know, even this, and Jean, like this may become a number that is in and of itself, even as phase one, if it hits a debt exclusion issue, you know, two things. Number one, there's a number of us that can garner widespread support to do something for these fields. That is, I think we've demonstrated we can do that. But on the flip side, it would be nice to know the threshold as to kind of where the debt exclusion issue hits and what we can do underneath that. So Dee brought this up, Dee Riley, that we don't really have the ballpark now. It may be sort of touchy to do that, but it may be nice to know what we could do under that threshold. And I know we're competing with other requests, so it's not that easy, but we got to do something, and we probably have to find the increments where we can sort of start to make yardage on this. We have our list of issues with baseball and softball. We're taking some of that upon ourselves. We'd all love to see that lacrosse wall go up for the sake of our kids who are in all these programs, and the list goes on. But I like that we're phasing this in. I'd love to even, you know, further refine it so that we kind of know maybe if we can get something accomplished that eschews a debt exclusion, a tax battle, you know, that's going to be important to know, like what we're up against. So I think I don't know how that feedback loop really occurs effectively, but I think that's important, that we have to do something, and I don't think it should be at the risk of, you know, just a debt exclusion fight, because with all the other things that we have to do, there's going to be more such discussions. So that's all I wanted to say. So thank you for doing all this. This is great. We're still here trying to make these improvements to these fields. Thank you.
Thanks, Darren. Go ahead, Dave. And then Jean, sorry.
So my question was just going forward, you have a group of interested people here as parents, but also we're representing stakeholder organizations for the town and youth sports. So how can this group help move this effort forward collectively? In my notes, I've counted at least 4 to 6 steps or groups that would need to thread this through in order to get it approved. So I guess how to keep the momentum going on it, and how we can help the town with this effort going forward.
Sure. So Dave, I think one of the things that would be most helpful is when we have our next public forum, that we can strategize about all the things we talked about tonight and push it out to the public in a public forum. I think it's most helpful to get as many people to that public forum as you can, so they can understand what we're looking for and understand, you know, all the work that's gone into this and the progress that we're trying to make for the community. So I think that's extremely helpful. And I saw Jean had her hand up.
Yeah, and I would just add in, listen, at the end of the day, what I just suggested of a larger phase 1 amount that we just try to do right now, that's not necessarily the only way to do it. You could phase it longer over time and try to build a longer schedule, including trying to use CPC and under other funding sources. But it's my sense that there's a pretty strong need for a phase 1 sooner rather than later. So I'm worried about prolonging phase 1 over too many years and, you know, town meeting cycles and vote cycles. But happy to take that feedback. And I would just say too, for those of you who are familiar with CPC, and I know a lot of folks are, that the way CPC works is it needs to be recommended by CPC to move forward on town meeting ballot. If things get held up, they get held up. And CPC, the way people get appointed to CPC, there's 3 citizen at large positions, but the rest are compositions of all different groups that choose their person and send their person onto CPC. And so, you know, CPC is sort of a group on its own doing its own thing. And so if you're counting on that year after year, that is subject to a lot of political ups and downs as well, and not necessarily a consistent payment stream. unless you do a big loan against CPC that they have to pay no matter what, which is, but you know, I think there would be some strategy in that. So there is some strategy behind the money. And a part of that depends on how much people want and how quickly. And so that's another consideration. And once we get more firm numbers, I think we can start to try to land on some options, maybe bring it back to this group to get feedback, including on timing, and have a better sense of where we might be going or might not be able to go to.
Thanks, Jean. Any other questions? Okay, so what I would like to suggest, I want to thank everyone for coming tonight. I want to thank Mark and Olivia for all of their hard work on these plans. What I'd like to suggest is that we meet probably in 2 weeks because we need to keep the momentum going. Town meeting's just right around the corner. I know it seems far away, but the warrant will close in March, and we want to make sure we have all of our ducks in a row. So I know we have school vacation week 2 weeks out, so maybe we're looking at 3 weeks out at this point. But at that point, we'll come back with, you know, preliminary costs. We'll start socializing it as much as we can internally and filling out some necessary applications with, you know, capital, CPC. We can do some of that legwork in the meantime. And then I think the next meeting should be with us as well as a public forum. So everyone to attend because you came tonight, but I'd like to have an in-person public forum, maybe at Wilcott Commons, Town Hall, don't know where yet, and get greater feedback from the community at large. So I think that's the next steps. Does anyone have any questions about that or concerns? No? Okay. Well, without any other additional questions, I want to thank you again for your time. Thank you to Activitas. Thank you for everyone for your input. And you'll see a meeting invitation from me within the next few weeks.
Great job.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Have a good night.
Michelle.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Michelle.
Good night.
Thank you.